On a desolate battlefield that is populated with mean faces for some reason hero faces off against the demon lord who mocks him. The demon lord is charging up a purple attack. The hero recognizes this and picks up the rock that will be his last resort. The demon's spell creates a huge rock in the sky, and it heads towards the hero. But high school physics being what you are, the smaller rock wins the speed battle and pushes the bigger rock back and destroys it for good. The hero is tired of all the cheap tricks the demon has pulled and is ready to end this fight. With a sweeping attack, the demon agrees to end it quickly and they both engage in battle. The demon rushes forward with his demonic power and the hero does the same with his golden dragon power spam. The two clash several times the second and they seemingly uniform. The battle rages on, and the ground beneath their feet crumbles under their collision as the dust settles. The demon lord looks the worse for wear with his breathless and torn clothes. The two stagger towards each other, stabbing each other right in the chest without a care for their own lives, and when the last bits of life escape the hero's body, he is simply glad that his battle is over and he can finally rest. After some time, the students are seen going to school in the morning, and one boy with a very specific haircut is very excited to be there. He can't wait to make friends and live a normal life like a normal person. My normal students who are stretched out in the halls like hello, it's a very normal day, in which other students find it strange, but they don't want to directly interfere so they don't say anything about it, but it's hard for them to keep their distance when he walks in to directly introduce himself to them as Blade. The guys introduce themselves as Chasm and Clay, and the girls are Jessica and Claire. Blade friends emphatically announces that he's here to get one, and asks if Claire wants it. Blade agrees to be friends with them and is very happy that he already has 4 friends. He is now trying to make 10,100 friends at school, when their conversation is interrupted by a red-haired girl, reprimands them for rioting. In the middle of the school halls, the girl burned hard. She took the first place in the school, and therefore among the student body you can not only walk, but someone was given the title of emperor. But the Blade did not care much about the titles. He stood up in his face and introduces himself. But Ernest is curious as to why he hasn't seen him here before, revealing that he's actually a transfer student who just arrived at the school. But Ernest doesn't believe it. The famous Rosewood Academy only accepts students who aim to become a hero of justice. Such a late emission. Blade says that he has no intention of becoming a hero, and hearing Ernest's anger, he just wants to make friends here, and yells at him for having such a weak decision. But Blade resents it and asks him to take him to the principal's office because he should have already been there. Ernest and Blade arrive at the giant door of the principal's office and he announces them. They are told to enter and Ernest immediately bows when he sees the man in front of them. But once again Blade doesn't care and just walks forward. Ernest tries to stop him and asks him if he really isn't know who is sitting in front of them, but the knife knows that it is the king. He just doesn't care. He tries to apologize for his rudeness, but the king is not offended in the slightest. He praises Ernest record and says that starting today he will be the new headmaster of the academy. Overhearing this, Ernest begins to express his happiness that the king himself is being instructed. While the knife stands there, having enough of the king stroking his ego, observes what happened and tells him to shut up and get out of his office, but in a more polite way. The king only wants to talk to the knife, and now Ernest is angry that he's getting all the attention from the king, and Stomps asks the knife why he did it to the king. To go and do it because Ernest must hate him now. The king says he's here to help rehabilitate him as a hero and make some changes to the curriculum to help him regain his strength, but Blade doesn't want that at all. He wants to be a normal person now, but the king doesn't want to let him become normal. He wants him to regain his strength. Even though the demon lord is dead, the Blade will return to the training grounds later runs, where a group of students are working on their training. He sees Ernest's strengths and she asks him what he's doing here because it's an advanced class, and Knife says that when he took the test for the lower class they told him to come here, but he doesn't buy it, and when he shows his target to prove this, then he thinks he must have bribed someone to get into the advanced class, or at least tricked him into the academy, because the academy never accepts someone who doesn't want to be a hero. Doesn't accept. But once again he wants to be friends with 100 people, so he starts asking everyone on the training ground to be his friend. While Ernest is still talking, he tells him upset that he's not paying attention. He says he'll listen to her when he's there, talking, but then he puts his hand on her head and tells her that he's still listening to her. She's embarrassed by this and draws her sword to strike at him, but he dodges the blade and the lamp goes out. Cheeb hit the wall. He was surprised that he avoided the strike, but before he could say anything, another student came up and told them that the teacher had asked all the students to collect knives. Missing the opportunity to be friends in order not to lose, he introduced himself to the girl and asks her name, but she doesn't answer at first. Ernest says how the girl doesn't like talking to people, but after Blade's influence, she tells him her name is Sophie. Ernest is a little G before the Blade actually manages to get her angry to talk. He asks the teacher to let him test Blade's ability in class. He tells Blade to cut through a set of enchanted armor with his sword, which any advanced student can do, if the knife can't. He then proves that he cheated to get into the school and he has to leave. Doesn't seem too nervous and only asks him what his power level is for a higher class, and when he says above 3 levels normally he activates his second sword technique. He absolutely atomizes the armor and some of Ernest's clothes, and everyone takes some damage from the power of the Blade attack, and Ernest asks who he is, but he still says later that he's just a normal guy. Lunch Knife sits at Ernest's table and invites his other friends to sit at the table, but they refuse the invitation. Ernest says they don't want to sit here because they are afraid of him, but Knife wants to know what they are. Terrified by it, he takes a bite of the food and is immediately surprised by how delicious it tastes. Ernest apologized to her for what he said earlier because he thought she cheated on him when he gained the power to enter the academy by itself, but the Knife had already forgotten all about it, so he says that he does not worry about it. He proves that he is his friend, but he is surprised that he considers him his friend. He is ashamed, but finally happy to have a friend. That evening, Ernest was still in his room, glad to finally have a friend. Suddenly a sword on the wall made a sound, and he remembered his childhood, seeing the sword that he told him to surrender, and sure enough, it was a cursed leg. Grabbed the stained sword and then his hair turned red. The next day Ernest is training with the other students with that damn sword. He is fighting Lancer. He activates his lance but it just hits him and he loses, but then the curse starts and he wants to split this guy's sword. Open-minded, but manages to stop himself at the last minute. He summons another challenger and Sophie steps into the fray. They strike across the field, but then Ernest jumps into the air and launches a flamethrower, causing Sophie to dodge the next stab forces. But the Knife is afraid to fight Ernest, but he is not well, but he insists that he is fine, but when he raises his sword again he falls to the ground and is caught by the Knife and then takes him to the hospital. But the doctor says there's nothing he can do for him. The doctor can cure any injury or illness. Even if you're on the brink of death, he can bring you back. But curses are beyond his expertise. Ernest wakes up and says, "Rides. Where is he?" And the Knife tells him that he is unconscious and he brought him here. Then he tries to get up and asks if he has committed any murders. The Knife makes him unconscious and it's too hard to lift Ernest. Despite this, he convinces her, then tries to leave, but the doctor tells him to go back to the bedroom and rest. He tells the doctor that if anything happens, he will look after Ernest, so he should be allowed to leave, and the doctor allows it late. As soon as he sees the other students, he becomes more concerned about his image and tells her that he can walk on his own. The Knife makes him rely on him a little more, but even though they are friends, Ernest as his help Knife doesn't want to get it. Sneaking into the academy headquarters to find out more about Ernest's sword, he discovers that it is a demon sword, and the next day he allows the boy to put the cursed demon sword away. Private, and she thinks he's trying to scare her into taking first place, but the Knife doesn't care. When he really cares for her she accepts it, and when he asks her to take out the Knife then told him he knew it. The story behind his sword. Later they meet at the top of a building and the Blade asks how he got the demon sword and he says that he accidentally touched the sword when he was young and then the sword tried to take it to wreak havoc, but he has managed to fight his urges until now. Lei tells him there is a way out of this and he knows, but it's dangerous because if he does, the demon will come alive, but the Knife convinces him. If the demon is born, he cuts it. Ernest agrees to fulfill the contract and summons the demon. It appears in the dark space with a huge demon and it almost takes over his body, but the Blade is to control it. Yes and thank you. He is able to fight and defeat the demon, in a dark and stormy night and in a very dilapidated castle. The echoes of the battle can now be heard through the halls. Later, while the class is practicing harnesses, he asks Blake to at least put away his sword because treating him less in a fight is disrespectful to an opponent. Ignoring what he says, reminding our hero that he looks different after that. All one morning the young man finally understood. But when Harness asked him excitedly what he meant by this, he could not answer. Leonard tried to help him. "I don't know if she's changed, but she looks different." Leonard can't stand it, and when he tries to hit her, she tells him that she has to decide if it's flattering if she changes her Harness hairstyle. In turn she tells him that it's not. He wished she had noticed the change. His face spoke another language, Razor talking, or rather, that aside. Harness told him that while he had time to play with Leonard, they would focus on training with Sophie. The blonde cried because they made her look like a secondary character. Harness explained to the boy that Sophie was training alone and that even though she was very obedient, she was always alone. The aforementioned Sophie only follows orders, but when she sees him tell her his name, she knows he cares for her. Our main character agrees and goes with her. On the other hand, harness Rubio. From then until the end of his life he will have to run 10 kilometers every morning. Since he couldn't beat the stupid knife, he went to introduce himself to Sophie again and told her that Harness had sent him to watch. Sophie thought he had ordered her to train, under his gaze. But Blade explains that he not only helps her, and when asked why he doesn't use guns, they work together. Sophie tells him that they only taught her how to fight with her fists. So Blake teaches her how to use a sword. Asked if it was an order, and again Blade had to answer that they were friends and that friends should not remember to help each other. And that of course it was not an order, you should not train with it, if you don't want. Sophia agreed to train together, but before they start a new campaign and the lesson ends, our hero is disappointed. And Sophie's face does not help to improve the atmosphere the next day. At first, Sophie couldn't damage the armor, so Blade said that she could channel the power as she realized that she would have a chance to split, as another extension of her body to drink into the sword. Just as she exerted force on her fists, after a day of training with her armor as if nothing had happened, Sophie finally failed with it. Blake was about to finish the training, but at this point, can the girl defeat him with this power, he wondered, as Sophie told him when he asked who she was talking about. She wants to defeat our hero Ernest. He says that maybe he is defeating him because it's not easy to level with him. Sophie says that he immobilizes him and that the move is stronger than his blade sword technique. He agrees and says that he can't move her. The girl replies that if he allowed her to move, he wouldn't have done it right away. She asks him to continue teaching her the next day. The king summons Blade. After the boy complains that he called his office in the middle of the lesson, the old man asks him how school life is going. Our hero tells him already and his friends, so everything is going well now. The king says, answers, lucky for him as a hero, and he's been fighting non-stop since he was 3 and he doesn't even have a best friend. It's so cool. The game sarcastically apologizes for saving the world's ass while having fun, but let's put the king aside. Yamiz asks who he considers his friends. Blade says he has a few, but recently he's been spending a lot of time with Sophie. Something his goal was to be better than him, but he will never achieve it. When the old man is asked what he is talking about, he asks that he does not know about the project to create a great artificial hero. Seeing as he doesn't explain that he's a hero by nature, his powers appear out of nowhere. But this leads a group to wonder if he exists at all. It must be possible to create such a creature. Thus, if they began to experiment with people with enormous potential using ancient or long-lost knowledge, they began to artificially restore the hero's powers in a person. Not only that, but for him the original candidate clones created, to try different experiments and make different adjustments. The girl he calls friend is called Sophie and the accent means fetus 12 in the ancient language, which means that the girl is the 12th clone of the original Sophie. They gave her for a long time. They were treated only as a woman, the subject of the experiment, and they are brutalizing his body. They ask him about the organization. The old man tells him not to worry, he already destroyed it. When the counter Sophie promises him that he will be free. But rejoice or cry, Lash asked him instead. Yes, that was the order. Blake left the place after hearing this and walked the halls. Realizing his friend's behavior, they took Sophie from ordinary life just to create a hero, and if her powers never appeared, it was his fault, had never existed. No one would have tried to replicate what she was. So in order to pay off the piper, Blade decides to make Sophie live a normal life. The problem is that he doesn't know what it is. So he decides to ask his acquaintances what it is. He was the first young doctor to go, and when he heard her question, he was proud of her and finally became interested in these matters. Sudak answered that youth means love. After that, he went to ask Leona, who gave the same answer. Then he left with these two and heard the same answer again. She then asks them to teach them what love is. Claire tells her that she needs to meet that person. She says that Blade went in harness to ask her how to set up a date, which confuses the matter again, and she replies, couples, they spend time alone, they walk together, they go to the store while they wait for Blade to propose. He thanks him and tells him it will be a great date, which annoys Harness. When he invited the girls into the locker room, he walked in without thinking. He asked if it was an order. Blade told him no, but the most important thing was that the girl was slowly opening her heart, and that day she took a step because she accepted them did instead of a meeting. Instead of a meeting, the girls committed an act of hatred with Blade. Well, it could be from someone else. Date Jessica. Arns and Claire were ready to spy on the lovers. Jessica provided the group with bean bread. That's why he asks them not to treat him differently now. His priority is making sure Blade doesn't do anything weird. So they're almost friends since they're equals. No return to lovebirds. Sophie arrived at the same time. The girl clearly says that she does not know anything. dating, but Blade asks him not to be afraid to study hard about dating and prepared the route. Today's plan is simple. They meet at 10, they say hello at 10:01, they start walking at 10:03, they walk until 10:30, then they rest until 11 and 12, have lunch at the rest of the route will tell them later. The girls realize that this animal knows nothing about dating, but that makes it more fun. Blade's plan is off to a bad start because it's already 10:04 and they still haven't moved, but the boy is about to have a crisis before Sophie took his hand and said that it's okay. They just need to start walking hand in hand. Harness didn't like it at all. The lovebirds meeting was simple, and first they walked. Then they ate ice cream. They ran and walked along the dock and almost killed their friends without realizing that there were small cars in this world. He went there too. Although it wasn't a good idea because no one knows how to measure their power, and they ended up destroying the car. When the girls apologized for them, they took Sophia to drink coconuts. The goal was literally closer to was struck on their cheeks. The knife came off and almost ran away. When he asked her what happened, she said she didn't know, but her heart was very excited. There's good love even though we all already know what's going on here. Doa plus or minus a. They're surprised the pack of wolves haven't noticed them yet. Drinking coconuts. ADN is having internal conflicts because what the turtles are doing is rude to appease her. Looks like dirt. Jessica buys him an ice cream so they get distracted and the thugs get lost again, but the next activity they do is a bit late, but Sophie asks her not to worry. She knows it's a shortcut to solve their problems. It also involves the destruction of the town, which costs the school from the budget. His final destination was the legendary fountain. Sophie didn't understand the special aspect of it, and Blade told her that he didn't either, but it must be legendary. Sophie tells him that she is very happy to see him when they sit down. She feels that they are closer now. So if you want to know why he did all this for her, he replied because they were friends. I think they were for real, but if she tells him she will agree to be his friend, and since I heard friends don't keep secrets from each other, she has something to tell him. He is not a normal person. He is an incomplete experiment created to be an artificial hero. And although he is not perfect, he can use the hero's powers, which surprises Blade, not because of what happened, but because of what he told him and the girl. It can change because it gives him a performance just like a legendary hero. Laws of physics. But he has no control over his powers at all. Proof of this is that when he tried to increase his body mass by 1,000, his body underwent 10,000 modifications and finally broke the floor. He can also stop time. But each hero's power can only be used for 10 seconds. By telling him his secret, the lady decides. Then so does he, and he reveals that he's a superhero, or at least they made him so called because he would no longer be able to use his powers. Curiously, Blake asked. He already knew that Sophie would say no, but he felt that there was something familiar about him, and as soon as our hero begins to apologize to her, he knows that it will not be enough and that it is normal for Blade to hate him. When asked why, tells him that the reason he was born with these cursed powers is simple because the first time he existed, Blaze spoke to a man and told him everything he felt. He never asked to be a hero, but since he was 3 years old, that's why he had to do it, because he didn't have a childhood. He had to see thousands of atrocities with thousands of animals and be close to death, so he counted them not do it, and when he didn't succeed, they blamed him for everything. Sophie comforted him and said that everything was not bad because he helped many more people, in his opinion. Before entering the academy, the king gave him a tour of the kingdom. Allowed to travel, he was able to visit many cities where, speaking of the hero, he could see the face of hope and life in the people who gave hope to the world. And he should be proud of that, because Blade tells them that he just can't. Then Sophie, he's proud that he grew up to be a great artificial hero because now he can try to be as great as he is. Which Blade overhears so he doesn't have to worry about his past as a hero again. Decided. Sophie respects him, decides and tells him that as friends they should have secrets too. The knife quickly devoured the curry. His friend looked at him wondering how a man could have such a large appetite. Her napkin, seeing both the knife and Sophie's romantic tension, makes Arness jealous and stops them from acting like lovers. Claire and her group ask Arness if she can join them for lunch. He was embarrassed, but he didn't need to because Blade never cared about their clothes, and even now the artist doesn't mention that Claire and her friends were promoted to the higher classes. Just like Blade. Chasen Blade said that they only wore the clothes they chose now because they were promoted. So the girls asked how they would show themselves again. The very cold Leonard decides to be Jessica's savior because the Blade doesn't realize he's flirting with her. Leonard tells both girls he looks like a princess and introduces him to them, but the girls find him pathetic. Jessica asks Ernest who this hot sad guy is, and Ernest mentions that he's just one of her classmates. He hears that the headmaster is bringing a monster to this academy. Chasm is scared, thinking that this monster will use them in training, and Arness says that their assumptions are correct, but the knife is not bothered at all and continues to eat his food as he has faced thousands of monsters throughout his life. It tries to mess with him, but But he knows that he can defeat any monster with his bare fists. Suddenly an earthquake goes to Rosewood Academy and causes chaos in the cafeteria. But Sophie realizes that it is not an earthquake, but a shockwave caused by the movement of the monster that the artist talked about. But Sophie thinks that she can agree to fight before the building. The monster comes to him first. It invades the cafeteria and reveals itself as a yellow dragon blade. Smiling at the sight of the dragon, he slowly approaches him. Even though Arness repeatedly tells him to fall back, the dragon is excited to see the food in Blade's hand. And the blade realizes that the dragon is hungry. Arness can't believe he punched the dragon unarmed and wonders if he's seeing things like that. The blade tells him that the monster isn't technically a dragon because he was still a child. After being calmed down by the dragon blade, he asks if he was scared of the dragon because he crawled here, but the dragon looks at him as he hugs him again. After eating, the dragon lets Aurora go because the food is too spicy. Blade laughs at the spectacle. Everyone is shocked and wonders how a human can be so weak. Blade realizes that he has all the attention on him, so he tries to tell everyone that what they are witnessing is completely normal, and claims that most wizards can be as strong as him, but claims that the face of the disciples can be as strong as his. Blade tries to tell them that the dragon he hit was neither a great dragon nor an ancient dragon. But he doesn't understand that everyone is a Sayamata like him and they can beat a dragon with just one punch. The students even start backing away, thinking that the blade is dangerous, which makes him very upset because his only purpose in this academy wasn't to show his power behind it. Particles appear and transform into a blonde girl, who is surprised to see that the dragon has disappeared, and surprisingly, girl jumps on him calling him her papa. She tells Blade that she has been longing to meet her father and hugs him tightly, but Blade tells her to get off as he doesn't think he is her father. Blade promises the dragon girl that he will help her find her lost parents, and asks Ernest where did the dragon go. Arness tries to tell him that the little girl in front of him is the dragon, but Blade doesn't believe something so unnatural would be true. The dragon girl keeps calling Blade her papa, so Blade tells her to be quiet as she is tarnishing his reputation in front of the entire academy. Blade asks Sophie this time and she promises him that the girl behind him is the dragon. Blade believes her the little girl if she is actually the dragon, but instead of answering, the girl jumps on Blade again to play with him. She refers to Blade as her papa and tells him that his attack earlier was quite amazing. She hugs him again, telling him to spoil her, but he doesn't understand what or why this is happening to him. Later at night, when Blade is inside his dorm trying to take a bath, he also helps his daughter. He begins to wash off her horns, calling her by the name Ku, and she asks him why he is calling her Ku. All of a sudden Blade explains that Ku is the name of a knight who is strong and dutiful and who always keeps his promises. Ku turns around and tells him that she also keeps promises, as she believes that the oath of a dragon is more precious than life itself. Arness comes into Blade's room without even knocking and gets embarrassed seeing him take a bath with Ku. Artist then moves on as there are more important matters to be dealt with. She tells Blade that all monsters, including dragons, are creatures who always pursue power, so according to the information she found, because Blade defeated the dragon, its body perished but a part of its soul remained to retain information, and that part of the soul is Cool, but that doesn't explain why Ku is referring to Blade as her father. So Artist explains that the part of the soul gets reborn into another body and then they will imitate the form of the terrorist being that defeated them. Arness believes that it's the dragon's instincts and a part of their evolution as they grow stronger. In other words, Ku has taken the form of a human after being beaten by Blade, who is also a human. Still, the chances of that happening is quite rare according to artists, as they aren't many humans who can't defeat dragons in the first place. Blade understands that Ku is calling him her father as he was responsible for her rebirth. He accepts his destiny and introduces Kudo Artist, who reveals herself to be taking a shower together with Blade. And that makes Arness furious, realizing what a shameless degenerate Blade is. She kicks him in the face and immediately leaves his room as she no longer wants to see his face. Later, Arness goes to the cafeteria and sees that it is being prepared, but she gets furious once again as she sees Blade and Ku walking together, who asks Blade to treat her to some food, but he tells her to get some herself if she is so hungry. Still considering that she is just a child, Blade decides to feed her, and Ku tells everyone that she loves getting fed by her papa and finds it thousands of times better than eating by herself. Claire wants to feed Ku as well, but she doesn't even want to interact with them, and calls them mere humans who aren't even worthy of eating together with her papa. Blade tells Kuna to insult Claire anymore, but she is persistent about being the only one who should get his attention. She even gives him instructions on what he should do every day and tells him that he has to take care of her every single day from now on. She gives him detailed instructions on what he must do, and Blade agrees to do everything for his daughter. All of Blade's friends call him a lowly being who is such a degenerate that he would take advantage of a little girl. Blade's friends unanimously agree that he is guilty of his crimes and the punishment. Blade doesn't understand why this is happening, so decide to ignore it. At first his reputation is ruined, and now his friends don't want to talk to him anymore. He doesn't understand that it's all because of the dragon girl, and he sits in the corner sulking alone on the training ground. The other students tell Arnes that the Blade looks like he really wants to train with them, but Arnes doesn't think he deserves to support someone there. Walking around the academy and seeing his Blade, he is more than happy about the chance to fight his father and jumps down to train with him, asking if he wants to join him in training. He can't wait to show off his strength and gets ready to fight him, but Claire's group stops them as they ask how they should train from day one. Jessica claims that what she specializes in is espionage, so Blade advises her to train with Sophie as they would make a good pair. Paul advises the others who left the Blade training grounds, so as Blade wonders where he is now, we see that Ku is actually just walking around the academy and he sees a few of the students doing their training, is interested in joining them. One of them even asks who he wants to be friends with, but Ku thinks he can't get along with them because he's a dragon, so he runs away and accidentally blames whoever is conveniently standing in the corner, takes him back to his room, and then tells Arnes that he's sorry since the coup happened, but he's sorry to go home since he's been playing alone with him. He also knows that Sophie is there and happy that everything is going well. Then he sees the knife looking at the moon and stars and asks if he wants to be friends, but the Ku claims he's fine alone, which the knife couldn't agree with. The next morning he forces King Kuss to be a foster father because he doesn't want to play with it anymore, to be with Nave. Nave starts looking for her and finds her in her room just playing with dolls. She realizes that Ku wants to be friends with her friends, and actually everyone wants to be her friend, so she realizes that they both have similar goals and it hurts her. He asks the underclassmen to come to the training grounds and fight the Ku with them so they can finally be his friends. The other upperclassmen kneel in front of the students so they agree to the Ku. The king officially organizes the battle and the Ku comes there in his dragon form. For the knife fight he tells Ku to fight fair before the battle starts, and you can see how he enjoyed this video shows.